Hi everyone, it's Maria from J'adore le papier. I'm here to do a flip through of this champagne journal in Keepsake. It was originally built to be a champagne tasting log, but ends up it's actually a keepsake and historical reference, almost like a encyclopedia, because I actually used an antique encyclopedia medical journal and the original spine. So the spine is actually 3 inches. All I did was cobble it back together or reinforce it with some leather so it looks very Frankensteinish. I sealed the edges so that they would stop, peeling back a little bit. And then I didn't seal the covers just because they have a nice finish to it and I love that texture. And I didn't cover up all of the spine itself. So there's the journal, cleaned it up, but you'll see some scrapes, bruises, and some discolorations just to show how old it really is. And of course, I filled it with mostly antique, a lot of vintage pages. I used the traditional book binding, but you'll probably see some flax linen, the French fabric, actually covers parts of actual signatures of the text block just because they were so fragile and I knew that this would become a very heavy book, but it also gave me enough space to be able to fill it up and create a version without talking so that if you just want to look at the pages, because there's a lot of history in here. But thank you to Catherine at French Biodou for all of the historic photographs that you'll see and for the inspiration. And then, of course, there are some great postcards in here. Just a note also about the leather patches. So to reinforce the upper and bottom spine, all I did was a little bit of blanket stitch. I did use some vintage quilt patches, so blanket stitch top and bottom. And then on the spine, this actual cork matches or goes with this cork foil. So they were part of the same bottle, one of these small growers. It took me a very, 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 very long time because without the proper tools, so you'll see that. But I used a leather cement glue, so that should be on there forever, and even with the book open, it'll still lay nice and flat. But you could actually adjust it based on how much more fat it gets, but I suggest keeping it just this size, just because if you're a writer, then you know that I like to keep things nice and flat and even for you. So here it is open. She's pretty chunky at the start. It has this handmade paper that I wanted to use as an end paper, but I didn't have enough. But the odd thing was it was already shaped sort of like a champagne cover or, sort of a champagne wrapper. And then, of course, it has the giant bubbles and the gold speckles. And then this little piece here is an Italian note card that I got from Rachel. And you can actually open this up and document what this journal is for or who you're gifting it to. The front book plate is actually an antique book plate, and it's from a Christian book, but the title, I don't know if you could see it on camera, The Lord of the Vineyard. So I didn't want to cover that up. And underneath, you can feel the actual bookbinder's tape underneath. So I have 2 of that, and then the maul itself. So it's got an uneven feeling to it, but that's what a lot of older books have. Benedictine monks were the earliest winemakers, including champagne makers. So this is actually Saint Benedict of Nursia. This painting is a painting by Father Angelico from 1441. Actually, a pocket right in here. And I just tucked a little detail. So you'll see a lot of detail in history. These pages, these very crinkly pages, were the original book pages from this medical encyclopedia. And you'll see a lot of my favorite 1850 French ledger paper. So C for champagne. Champagne really is the history of France. Oh, this note here, the black and white fabric, this is because the Benedictine monks are known for their black habit and very simple attire. This French document from 1848 has become a tuck, and it has a little map referencing Champagne. Grapes were planted in the Champagne region by Italians. So this is just an Italian receipt that I got from Roxy Creations. So I love the stamps here, but the history is early 500s. They started planting and growing champagne actual grapes. The primary is Chardonnay, and then the other two are Pinot Meunier and Pinot Noir. You'll notice the difference because it has white flower specks, almost like a dusting on their leaves at harvest. So I just painted my little swatches here on actual Italian book pages. And it's funny because working with this ribbon, our favorite sari silk, that is graded in color. I forget who the seller is, but it was something that Heather from Ruby and Pearl introduced to me a few years back. Actually has this gradation of color, and actually it tells the story of champagne. So in the original wines that they were making, they were a light red. And they were trying to actually make it more red to compete with the Burgundy neighbors. And it turns out that they were only able to get a light pink because of the Champagne region being so cool. A lot of the grapes were having a hard time going to becoming fully ripened. Over the years, the Champagne turned to a light murky pink up until the early 1814, all the way to 1814 and 1816, when Veuve Clicquot or Barbe Nicole Clicquot co-invented the process of riddling. And so it took your murky wine color to the true crystalline wine color of today. But then in modern times, we are going back to the original roots of rosé champagnes. So I love this one piece of ribbon telling the full story behind this antique document, which is very old, tattered. Some of my favorites. Marie in the south of France actually helped me find some of the oldest documents. Is some homework I did for you. It's actually on old school book page. Is a map of the Champagne region and the top growing districts. So if the grapes are grown in regions that are deemed part of the Champagne boundaries by the AOC, not the American AOC, but the French AOC, then you can call it Champagne with a capital C. That's just a reference for you, or you can sketch your own. I haven't drawn a map since maybe 4th grade. And on the back here is actually a spread dedicated to the early monks, the early winemakers and champagne makers. And I did tuck a couple of things here for you. Here's a Normandy label, French receipt, and then of course a fun fact. In 1531, the oldest documented sparkling wine was actually invented by Benedictine monks in Meabh, or just outside Meabh, which is near Carcassonne in the Languedoc. That's in the south of France. This is actually a south of France wine label for you, or a Languedoc wine label for you. They might have a sparkling wine, I'm not sure. 1662, English scientists were already documenting that adding sugar to the second fermentation is what created the bubbly, the sparkles. And then the English were also the ones who created the strongest glass to be able to withstand the carbon dioxide pressures. Dom Perignon. And he, of course, is the Benedictine monk from the Abbey of Hautevillers, and he's the one who came up with wine producing and harvesting standards, or quality standards. And he's the one who recommended that the grape peels not only stay perfect, no bruised, but actually to remove the peels before the winemaking process to make more crystalline colored champagne. Here I have just a little bit of ledger, French ledger, and then onion skin paper, the British onion skin. And I had remnants of the handmade paper as the front end papers, front and back, in the shape of a bottle, just to honor some of the oldest bottles that used to break all the time. So sometimes the abbey or the monks would lose up to 90% of their inventory because of breaking glass, French glass. This floating pocket here is just, just washi tape for now. I haven't glued it down, but it's actually from England, one of my purchases a few years ago. So you have a calling card, authentic calling card, and a couple of magazine clips from Marie, from magazine page, champagne. You'll see some embossed paper in the back here and some of the softest ledger. And then this polka dotted embossing right here reminds me of champagne bubbles. And then the color of this antique lace looks like some of the early champagne because it was so murky. So that's just a little pocket. Marie Antoinette had to have her cake and her champagne too. This was roughly 1777, obviously before the Revolution. This is a British cigarette playing card. So this is just some decorative paper with some French ledger and in the shape of a bottle. In the early days, bottles were only numbered. They didn't have labels until, let's see, 1870s when Veuve Clicquot came out with their official label, and the yellow label was 1872. History of the French Revolution book page. And you could definitely paint on these, just like I painted with the For Your Grapes. You could add just a little bit of gesso or paint directly on there, and you'll just get different range of colors based on the patina of your book page. And some French ledger, and then the original contents of the medical book. I'm actually recording this for the third time now. This is a top down or a bottom flip, and this is from Ruby's, Ruby's my niece, Heather's Ruby and Pearl XO digital kit called The Yellow Dress, I believe, or Her Golden Dress. And then you have a champagne label with some scraps, including vintage scrap on the back there for rating and additional ledger scrap. And this silk piece here is supposed to remind us of the yellow label from Veuve Clicquot. This young lady here is supposed to represent a young Barbe Nicole Ponsardin. She was born in 1777. I'll have an envelope for you full of these little paper clips just because they are thin and fairly strong. Under this eco-dyed silk belly band is just a page from a Marseille political magazine. A lot of the labels were politically motivated for the early champagne, and then eventually they transitioned over to labels focusing on women and the social aspects of their lives. This is a little bit of French homework page where I just sketched out and used some more of the paper remnants to create a bottle, some of the old bottles that would break often, so you can see the cracks. And then this is a general from the French Revolution. Is it Dessous? And this little pile here is just to document, how the times of war throughout France and how it slowed down the making of champagne, but it didn't stop it. Comité Interprofessionnel du Vin de Champagne, CIVC, they come up with the rules and regulations. Those rules are then passed on to Institut National de l'Origine. I think this is the new AOC, the appellation. I think AOC, not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. French coronation book page. And I have a little bit of the remnant of a antique French lace because it reminds me of a crown. It just looks like a crown here. Oh, and then I just made some more of the origami envelopes that Danielle from Philip Page Handmade had shown on her last tutorial, and filling them with ephemera for you. Anyway, this section here introduces us to Veuve Clicquot, which is the widow Clicquot. This is a death letter, traditional, so with the black trim. And that's supposed to signify the death of her husband, Francois, in 1805. And so between 1805 and 1810, Barbe Nicole, Madame Clicquot, actually undergoes she becomes she learns about winemaking and business of a wine business before Pierre, her father-in-law, allows her to take over. And in 1810, she officially starts the business Veuve Clicquot Ponsardin. And so when she was actually making wines, they were still murky. So you could see little remnants of the yeast in here. But then by 1814, she actually does go ahead and invent the riddling process. So this is actually what do they call this one here? The tables, remouage tables. So you'll actually hold your nozzle down. So this is actually a little vocabulary, la tête, head top down. And you put it into these circles in the tables here. And then all of the sediment from the yeast will travel towards the bottle's neck. And then after, I don't remember how many weeks, but you quickly uncork it and let some of that remnant come out and then recork it quickly. So no longer do you have to transfer from one bottle to another. Not only is it wasteful, but you require additional bottles, disrupts the process. And then they just refill it with a little bit of new sugar, depending on the recipe, and recork it. And then that second bottling is what creates the ultimate champagne fizz, and then it'll be ready for sale. So this is one of the antique postcards that I've been waiting for from eBay. It's actually a Moet Chandon, so don't tell Veuve Clicquot that I have it in her section. These are just old French geography book pages to Russia, because in 1814, right after Napoleon was defeated, Veuve Clicquot actually managed to sneak 10,500 bottles to Russia before the bans were lifted. And that actually turned the tide for the company. So she was able to save them from bankruptcy. And then here's a little just paper sketch of Veuve Clicquot. I don't have any labels from her champagne. This is a Czechoslovakian movie or theater ticket. Just a little bit of vintage wallpaper and a calling card here. When they transported champagnes to different countries before Veuve Clicquot bottled things, they were actually transporting them in wooden wine barrels. So, for example, the wines that were being sent to England were bottled in England, but they were transported via wooden barrels. Vintage wallpaper from Heather, and then just a small little hand painting using my brusho and some paper to depict your champagne bottles here. Lots of French ledger for writing. The explosion of exports of champagne between 1800 to 1850 went from 300,000 bottles a year to 20 million a year in a 50-year span. So that's like taking one glass and then suddenly having 66 glasses of champagne. Geography of Britain, because again, the British had a lot of early influence, and also documentation on the second fermentation process. In your little French envelope here, again, to pay homage to the British, you've got a couple of playing cards, a couple of ladies here, and playing cigarette cards. And then a couple more of the cigarette order pages, French order pages. Journal de classe. This was a book page cover from the map page homework that I made for you. I just like that, just in case you're taking notes on different facts about Champagne history. This here, Pierre Larousse actually wrote the French dictionary and illustrated the more modern French dictionary. And then some more fun facts on what you call sparkling wines outside of the Champagne region. So they're just called sparkling wines, and then they use the method traditional. And some onion skin paper. Also, you could add little charms. Lots of original documents in this section. So this section is meant to be for you to document, some of your favorite wine labels. If you have any that you've collected or tasted over the years. Traditional original receipts. Instead of using staples, I just use some French thread, or it's almost like a rope from Ina, and then book pages just to show you how you can use them. Just gesso over the top, and then some writing on the blank spaces in back. This original postcard from France reminds me of what the golden label, yellow label for Veuve Clicquot, and the lady on front. It's embossed. And it's just a beautiful color to go with the rosé, because even at that time, they still had a lot of rosé color champagne. Oh, fun fact, 1844, Jacquesin invents the wire muselet, which is the wire that goes over your cork to keep the cork from popping open during shipment. So it's just that wire that you see every day today. And some journaling spot. This is from the Pink Ledgers kit from Ruby and Pearl XO. These tabs here, I actually have extra tabs for you, just in case you want to label different sections. Tastings, however you like to use the journal. More original receipts for writing. French book page. This is beautiful. Again, the labels started to transition to more of women's life, daily life, just to entice them to buy more of the bottles. So I didn't mention Veuve Clicquot was actually one of the first companies to employ traveling salespeople who would go out and allow different countries to taste their champagne. And that's how the champagne business boomed before Francois died. Menus, because the different taste profiles, especially if you're tasting from a small grower maker, will be influenced by the terroir, but then also those flavors from your terroir will influence the pairings that you put in your everyday menu or your special event. Côte de Blanc actually grows primarily Chardonnay, so that's that region there. And then this is just some additional receipts. I'll have a lot of these original receipts with blank sides, with some extras in the different sections of your journal. And then a lot of these Grand Magasin de Louvre, because they are fun to write on. Original labels were just numbers on the barrels or bottles. And then, of course, more and more women were drinking champagne. So it's actually funny, this man on this postage stamp, he's Italian, looks very stressed because he's helping the French harvest even more, if possible. This is a new section made up of music hymnal pages in Latin. So these are antique Latin pages here. This section is to celebrate the grower makers. So the smaller champagne houses who have maybe just a couple hectares, and their champagne really takes on the profile of their terroir. And so on these champagne notes that I get from Fat Cork, they've actually brought in a lot of the small grower makers that I used to visit in Champagne. It's probably a decade ago now, that we could not get them in the US before until Fat Cork came along. But it's to celebrate their families and their traditional process and the fact that they are so small and they're competing with the big houses in their own way. But most of their bottles will stay in France. But so again, it's their terrain is just the land itself or the ground, but terroir is the combination of the weather, the soil, the sunlight, which gives a distinct character to your grapes. And then again, depending on the character of your grapes and the flavor profiles that it might inherit from things that are growing around it, you can develop a very distinct or specific menu around your champagne. Smaller yields, but really, truly, in my opinion, some of probably the best champagne in the world. This is a postcard, and this is what inspired it all, really. It's about the growers and the process and the business of running a small champagne producing company. This is a little bit of a it's not watercolor, it's actually the combination of this ink from Ferris Wheel. This was the Workshop Wishes plus the Lights on Broadway combined with another layer of Workshop Wishes on top. So you'll see some of the glitter finish there. But the two combined actually create this nice dark Merlot color grape. This is meant to be a Pinot Noir grape, actually, before harvest. Oops. Old photos of family. Because it really is a family business. Original photos are all from Catherine at French Biaudou. She's our favorite treasure hunter. If you need it, she'll find it. F for family. And some more scraps. This is my third recording today, trying to catch all of the sunlight. Harvest season. Humans were actually doing a lot of the heavy labor lifting, not just machines, because they wanted to really keep the grapes pristine, not bruise them. This is an old postcard. This one is also from eBay. And mules instead of horses. I believe this is a mule. Yeah, more of the ears here, because they were slower than the horses and they would bruise the grapes less. And then, of course, Brûlée and some of the animals roaming through your land, which might end up actually influencing some of the flavor profiles, again, based on your terroir, and then your little corners here. An original French letter. Double-sided onion skin here, folded over, and it had a wax seal that actually burned a hole. So I went ahead and patched these holes right here just so that it wouldn't tear further. So I used French leather just to back it up. Again, more scraps. These are actually British bus tickets that I tore and made into your bubbly. And then just did a little sketch. Bravo, which is cheers to. Tuck in your tabs, your labels, do an inventory of your champagnes through the years, some of your favorites, ranking and ratings. Book page, you can write on the back. I just made a photocopy of this brush-up painting here. But I like that it says critical reviews because these are my favorite pages here. These come from the directory section of Grand Magasin du Louvre, and I love the newspaper print quality. And I thought this maybe could be where you put most of your wine tasting notes. So I've made little photo corners for you using old ledger paper scraps. Found using the mull, so it's backed with mull in addition to the French fabric, so it's really strong. This is the document holders that everyone likes to make. It actually has an original document, sale document. See, 1853, 18th of January, 1853. Instead of a staple, I just threaded it using the French linen fabric from Meabh. And these are actual shares of a tobacco company. So, but I like the colors because of the yellow, green, and brown. Storytelling, so it's not just champagne that you're documenting, but maybe the story from the evening or a party or some of the people you met. And some khadi paper for some watercolor painting. This one is one of my favorites. It actually was stuck in one of the ledgers that I had purchased a few years ago. The kid actually used it for his art projects, and he used the back of an old calendar, just like we're doing today. We're repurposing book pages to do our artwork. So it's a sketch of Twas Night of Christmas, or it was Christmas morning. There's his name here. Who is it? Somebody Murphy, the artist, George Murphy. I wonder how old he was. But on the back, he has a doodle, a cartoon doodle of a face spitting out a few words, something about Christmas morning. So it's kind of funny if you can see that. And then I just backed it with detailing, ledger pages for documenting. Maybe documenting your New Year celebration and the champagne that you had that year. Let's see, what did I have for New Year's? I think this was one of them for New Year's. Tastings, it was a Brut Rosé from Pascal Redon. Sections, an antique document, again from Marie. It has a beautiful, oh, you can't see it on camera, but there's a embossed logo there. Original document, and all the beautiful patina. These women are showing up for a wedding rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding, and she's already eyeing the menu with the champagne. So funny. So these are the little paper dolls that I like to cut out and have them standing up. And then a magazine page from Femina, 1911, I think. A formal wedding. And then a civil wedding. Either way, celebrate. Of an antique French chandelier that I got from Lena, a Christmas present she sent. So it could be a scrap tag, or it could be T for Tattinger, and you could do your wine tasting menu right here and tuck it into this little tuck. And I have it backed with some of Ruby and Pearl's Creme Brûlée and the eco-dyed print silk band, and a little remnant of a champagne foil. And then these are your tags, your scrap tags that I just stitched together so that you can rip them out easily along that perforated line. Coffee dye, French ledger. So if this adds bulk, you don't have to add it to your book. Here's your French linens. And then a sack full of little pieces of calligraphy if you want to do some collaging. And then again, this doesn't have to be added in the book, so remove some of the bulk. And then art page from Donna Morgan, her little iron, and her, I don't know if this is eco dyeing or paints, but I just love the rip window, so whatever champagne label you have behind will be through the book pages. Okay. Once, just so that you can maybe copy some of the taste profile, the smell, what to pair it with, etc., and create some of your own tasting cards. And then I didn't decorate the front, but I did decorate the back with a little collage of original receipt, wallpaper, and Italian book page. Oh, is that French? And then this is your back end paper, the same handmade paper with gold foil accents that look like a champagne bottle wrapping. And then this girl, actually, I didn't want to decorate the back, kept that for you, and you can see the binding tape there. But this again is from her golden dress by Ruby and Pearl XO, and then just some 1850 ledger for you on the back. We're finally done before the sun goes down. Hopefully I can edit this in the next day and a half. I hope you like it. Oh, the actual book itself measures 7 by 10 and a half, I think. 10 and a half, yeah. So 10 and a half right there. So it's a big one, but whoever gets this, I hope you enjoy getting to write in it and keeping your memories. But thanks for joining me and all your support. See you next time.